Well, from juggling reporters' questions to portrayals on late-night television, we take a look at what it takes to relay President Trump's agenda to the American public. One America's Trey Yingst sat down with White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer and has this exclusive interview.
It was December 22nd of 2016 when Press Secretary Sean Spicer found out he would be working for the Trump administration. A longtime communications director in the nation's capital, Spicer knew the ins and outs of D.C. politics. I sat down with the press secretary for an exclusive interview to learn more about what some people call the hardest job in Washington. Sean, I want to thank you for joining us today on One America News.
Thanks for having me.
Can you take me through the day you found out you were going to be press secretary for President Trump? What was that like? What was the transition like from working at the RNC to becoming the next press secretary of the United States?
Well, it's an amazing honor. It's humbling to realize the position this is, the responsibility that you have, and the very few people who've had this position and sort of the footsteps that you're following in. And the awesome responsibility that the president's granting you to communicate to the country and frankly to the rest of the world his priorities and his vision.
In the early days of the administration, you were both the press secretary and the communications director. Yeah. This is not the most common thing. What was the most difficult part about this? How did you juggle both roles, having to speak before the American people and also develop the communication message for President Trump?
So we have a phenomenal team here. We all work as one. And again, there's two sort of sides of the house, if you will. There's the day-to-day, which is a lot what the press office deals with, the incoming that is happening on usually within the current cycle. And then the communications office really thinks long-term, both rest of the week, rest of the month, rest of the year, and provides the services and the tools to help get the message out. You know, they work with the digital team, they're working with the other pieces to get the facts and figures out, to plan ahead, to make sure the events are thought of holistically from a communications perspective. So it's a lot on one person's plate.
How did you prepare for this role? I mean, day one, can you take me through when you got the phone call or who told you you'd be the press secretary?
The president-elect called. It was at Trump Tower. You know, still doing the transition. We were working on doing day in, day out, making sure that we were staffing and modeling the transition in a way that the president-elect wanted at the time, and he called and offered me the position, and I was ecstatic and thanked him for this honor. And it was December 21st or 2nd, if I recall correctly.
So take me through what's going through your head after you realize that you're going to be communicating the message of the president.
I think for anybody who's had a moment in life where they've had an opportunity fulfilled, or a dream fulfilled, it was probably very similar to anything that someone's had that they've wanted or wished for or hoped for or worked really hard for. That to see something like that fulfilled is, you know, anybody who's had something in their life done that, I'm sure it's a very similar experience. For me, this was just knowing that I was going to have this position and this honor and this responsibility was quite awesome.
You've worked in Washington politics for a long time. The president, he's more known as a Washington outsider. Right. So you came on from the RNC helping to shape the president's message from a conservative angle here in Washington. What were some of the how did you combine the Washington insider, Washington outsider feels for the Republican Party to be able to get this president elected?
Well, I think one of the points that we made throughout the transition, I think it held true for the campaign and definitely holds true now in the administration, is that it was his message and his vision and his agenda that we were buying into, not the other way around. And I think that's important to understand, is that it's not how long you've been in Washington or whether you come from or what your background is. It's whether or not you understand that the president made commitments and pledges to the American people that if he was given this chance and honor to be their commander-in-chief, that he would enact certain things. And when you sign up to this administration, you're signing up to help fulfill his vision.
How has your relationship with President Trump changed since that day in December when you found out that you would be the press secretary? 3 months into the administration now, tell me a little bit about how this has progressed.
Well, I mean, on a few levels, right? You obviously see him a bit more. Our offices, I mean, he's 20 yards away right now at most. And so there's a proximity factor that sounds kind of naive, but it's just true. I mean, when you're that close, during the campaign, we worked out of the 14th floor, and he was on the 26th. And I mean, logistically, there's a little bit easier to walk across out the back door of my office and into the Oval Office. So that's one thing. But then two is obviously the issue set is much different. You're working on things that are across agency, across department. Sometimes you're working with Congress, but there's a different set of issues and a different logistical reality of how things get done.
President Trump seems to have a message for the American people. His campaign to make America great again, a very specific campaign and something that the American people hadn't seen in the past. So is it difficult for you sometime to get behind the podium every day at these press briefings and communicate the message of someone else to the American people?
No, I mean, I've been speaking on behalf of different folks, for 25 years, and I think part of it is making sure that you understand their voice, their sense of urgency, their priorities, but you've got to be as prepared as possible every time you go out.
How do you prepare every day?
We sit in this office around with the entire team, talk about issues of the day, stuff that we know that is going to get asked. We talk about areas that the president wants to promote or policies that he's going to be unveiling, but it's just literally, a few hours every day of reading and preparing and going back and forth with the staff and getting briefed myself about making sure I understand the issues and his priorities.
What's the first thing you read in the morning?
Twitter and email. I mean, we have a team that is constantly sending up updates about stories that are happening or issues that are evolving. So there's a lot of email chains that go on that provide updates in real time, and that's pretty much the source, the number one source for us.
The briefing room has become a bit of a pop culture icon since President Trump has taken office. Obviously, Saturday Night Live, Melissa McCarthy parodying you. How has this unfolded for you? Do you watch Saturday Night Live? Do you find it funny?
I mean, most of the time I'm in bed. Try to get up early, go to church the next day, but it's but of course I'll see clips, the next day, or sometimes we TiVo it if and watch part of it the next day. But for the most part, generally speaking, you see clips if they involve you.
You think it's funny?
Some things are funnier than others. Some parts of it are tired and old and frankly just not funny. But there's a little bit of humor out there, and some of the things just. So I guess it's a mixed bag is the best way to put it.
You said you're often in bed before Saturday Night Live even comes on. What keeps you up at night? I mean, I imagine you have a lot to think about as the mouthpiece for the most powerful man in the world.
I think by the time I get home most nights, there's very little that'll keep me up by the time I get ready to go to bed. We're getting up pretty early again, so it's a constant cycle of waking up early, going to bed light, trying to make sure that we use every hour of every day to fulfill the president's agenda and articulate his message.
The president's message the first 3 months has been, roughly 3 months, has been healthcare is obviously a major topic of conversation. He's talked about tax cuts, talked about immigration, building a southern border wall. Out of all of the issues that the president has tried to communicate to the American people, what has been the hardest for you to communicate behind the podium?
That's a good question. I don't know that. I mean, I think we've done a really good job of rolling out the different, everything from Judge Gorsuch to some of the executive orders to some of his legislative priorities. I think we do a really good job here, not just our communications team, but our policy team, our legislative team, of making sure that we have a coordinated strategy as to how to roll things out, how to communicate them effectively to the various stakeholders.
Many people in Washington say that you have the hardest job in the district, in the nation's capital, but you also have the busiest job. Do you get any free time?
Not much.
When you do get free time, what do you do?
I try to spend it with my family.
How's your family reacted to this newfound, really, fame?
So far, so good. My wife's been unbelievably supportive. My children are young, so they don't fully appreciate it now, but I think they're excited and supportive.
What do they think you do for a job? Did
they
you
know
talk
where
to
I
them
work.
about it?
No, they know. They've been here, obviously, a few times. So they know it's the White House. They know what the president does, who the president is. They've met the president several times. So they know what I do and where I do it from, and they see clips on television.
I understand this is your dream job. You wanted to be a press secretary, and you also wanted to work at the RNC. You've worked at the RNC.
Box checked, huh?
Transitioned here to the White House. So my real question for you, though, is what sort of non-political jobs have you had in life? What was the first non-political job you had?
Well, I started off cleaning boats. I've cleaned the bottoms, Santique, and recoat it, varnish stuff. So mowed lawns, a lot of that kind of stuff early on.
How do you think those skills help
well, I think
communicating the message of the president?
They don't necessarily help communicate, but I think that there's a philosophical degree to which you understand the value of hard work, getting it done right the first time, making sure that you're really preparing. You know, I remember I cut a lawn once, did it real quick, and my father ran out and showed me the places that I'd missed and made me recut the entire lawn. And you do that a couple times, and you realize real quick that you either do it right the first time or you're going to do it right the second time, and you start to learn a valuable lesson there about how to conduct yourself.
Sean, thank you so much for your time
Thanks,
today.
Trey.